Hello, everyone, and welcome to Playblack. I'm Jay, an arts manager, educator, writer, musician, producer, and professional daydreamer.
And I'm Miguel, musician, arts administrator, educator, and lover of all things nerdy.
And this is Playblack, a podcast dedicated to nerddom reviews and hot takes on arts and culture and the human experience from the perspective of two melanated artists.
Just think of us as your typical anime bros, but like with master's degrees.
And therapy.
Let us know if y'all like that little tagline. We found it hilarious.
It's also very true. But yeah, no shade.
No.
It's not a little bit of shade to all the others. So yeah, let us know if this worked. Ooh, how you been? How you been, friend?
I'm all right. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. Excited to be in the Playblack flow that, we were gone for so long that us having content coming out bi-weekly, weekly has been really nice. And obviously it's just nice to have a consistent talk to Jay time, which I always really enjoy. How are you? What's going on with you?
Doing pretty good. I was away for a little bit, and so I've been trying to get back into the flow. And
away doing what, Jay?
I was away. Stop. I was away at my first artist residency. I was out at Mass Mocha, and for about 2 weeks, it was just writing and recording and editing and doing all the things of being an artist. And let me tell you something, y'all. Being a full-time artist in that way, it was kind of nice. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't know that I've ever in my life had this before where I could just wake up, eat, do art, go to sleep. And I was just like, I'm not mad at it. So that was really nice. Met some great people, got a lot of work done. So yeah, I can't complain. And now it's just coming back from that though into like your life, which is everything else. It was like, ugh, I really gotta. Okay, no, I like this too. I do love this too, but like, okay, so yeah, but it was good. I can't complain.
I'm on mute because there's a printer going on, but we're just gonna keep rolling with it.
Sure. Print for the gods. So I think one thing that I saw, however, and this is gonna dovetail in today's conversation. I, even though I was like pumping out scripts, I could be a slow writer and that I get distracted pretty easily. I'd be like picking up and like, let me just scroll real quick and then let me watch a YouTube video. Anyway, I was scrolling on Facebook one day to distract myself. And I've been seeing a lot more Grey's Anatomy clips. And it's because I watched one and then the algorithms. And I'm just like, y'all, I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. Like, I am chief resident at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I know what I'm doing. But anyway, one clip comes up and it's, spoiler alert, a scene in which Bailey was kind of getting reprimanded by her boss for taking a couple of sick days. And he's just like, why do you take a vacation? Like, there's a lot going on with the hospital. It's not really time for a break. And she's just like, I did what I had to do. I took a little break. And he's just like, well, next time, let me know. And she's like, well, if you must know, I lost my child. I was carrying a child. It didn't come to term. I lost it. I was mourning with that. I was living with that. Sorry. And that character in particular is an asshole. His name is Karasik. But one of the things that humanizes him is that he's lost a child before. His son died from like some sickness, I think. And he goes, before my son died, my wife also lost some babies before they were able to be carried to term. And one thing that we do is we lit a candle. He's like, everyone thinks that the pain just goes away or you forget about them, but you never do. Because for whatever length of time they were your child, they were your child. And so every year we light some candles for them. And, I was like, oh, what a nice little thing. And I see in the comments people first kind of talking about the grays of it all, of just like, that Karasik, he was such an intense character, but like, these are the moments that humanized him. I'm like, oh, poor Bailey. And then the comments kind of started to shift with like, wow, the light a candle thing, I've never heard that. And then it was, I've lost a child and this made me cry. And then people start sharing their stories of their own miscarriages and the things that didn't come to term for them. And I think what was really poignant about that for me was I was watching in real time in these comments, people build community with each other and have empathy for one another and have an emotional connection from one another. And it was all directly inspired by this piece of art, this made up fictional thing that did not exist with these characters that don't exist, kind of having surrogate experiences for the audience. And it just really made me think about, again, the power of art, that something that someone made up at their computer could facilitate this kind of exchange online between people, a really rich, emotional, healing, connective exchange. And so it just really made me think that the power that art has to affect people. And I think to bring that into today's conversation, one of the titans of industry, Akira Toriyama, who was a mangaka and the creator of one of his more well-known series was Dragon Ball, passed away, and it
Mhm.
really had a large ripple effect and a little outpouring of emotion from folks because so many had been touched or inspired by his work. And so today's conversation is going to be about him and his legacy. And so, Miguel, I know that Dragon Ball was very important to you. And so,
Mhm.
kind of, what's your relationship to Toriyama and Dragon Ball in general?
I mean, I think like a lot of people, Dragon Ball was probably my entry into anime. I mean, Toonami, like got me there, like got most of us there, right? But the thing that captured us was probably Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
Um, I would say for me specifically, um, I was blessed to have like a kind of a bilingual experience with it. In that, when I would go to DR in the summers, they were also watching Dragon Ball. And
Mm.
what was even cooler about it was like, how in America they would have these like seasons where they would put out like 24 episodes, and then you'd have to wait until the next year, until you actually got like further in the plot. In DR wasn't like that at all. So they would just like go continuously.
Oh, wow.
So I'd come home sometimes from DR like knowing stuff that no one else knew because I'd watched ahead, or I gotten so far around that I was
Hmm.
like seeing like backstory that I'd never seen before as well,
Oh, okay.
because they were just kind of playing Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z to Dragon Ball GT in continuous like all the time at like
Got
3:30
it.
on whatever channel it was.
Hmm.
They were playing like Dragon Ball Z, like it was the
Oh, boy. Oh,
and it
boy.
was and it was dubbed in Spanish. So I also had that
Mm.
fun thing with it. So it was something that I could watch with my aunt. It was something that I could watch with my cousins. It was something that I would always watch with my brother. And I think my relationship to it right now. Oh, I have to mention that I watched the entire series. I have the DVDs like underneath me right now.
Oh,
I
wow.
watched the entire series with my boy Dylan, in college, my sophomore year of college. Which we did the math once, and it's like 6 days of like continuous watching over what was probably like a 9 month period. So it's not that it's like the most important series to me or anything like that. But it's definitely something that's near and dear to my heart. And my relationship to it like now is I got so many people just reaching out to me when he died. Like that I some that I expected, but others that like I was like, oh, like obviously I talk to my brother all the time, but it was really cool, that like amidst us talking about his kids, he was like, "Yo, did
Yeah.
you see Toriyama passed away?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, man, I did see that." And then we had like a
Mm.
like a moment about it, and we continued
Mhm.
to send each other like little posts about it or whatever. And
Mm.
you know, my boy Sam West, who's living in Spain at the moment,
Mm.
we try to talk at least a couple times a month, but he hit me up like 3 days later, and we had like a 45-minute conversation and catch up that was
Wow.
prompted because Akira Toriyama passed away.
Mm.
I saw huge like bits of Latin culture. Like there was, like people were watching Dragon Ball Z like in the courtyard in like Mexico City,
Mm.
and like as a group, in
Mm.
tribute to him. People were putting up the spirit bomb in
Mm,
Argentina to give like,
hmm.
it's a big cultural thing. It's a big cultural
Yeah.
moment. And you don't really understand how much until something like this unfortunately happens. So yeah, it's just been a constant. And I really just appreciate it for what it is, which is like a beautiful inspiration for so many, and
Yeah.
a way to connect, which
Yeah.
is what art ultimately is. So, um, what is your relationship to Dragon Ball?
Yeah. Really quickly, I just wanted to say I love the idea of all the connective threads between human people, of which Dragon Ball was one, right? Of just like
Yeah,
not even knowing that, oh, that's a thing that like ties us together. I think that's
right.
really beautiful. For me, in a more classic way, I made this joke with you before about how um, my sexuality makes a lot of sense when I even think about this Toonami combo, because like before school, I would watch Dragon Ball Z and I would watch Sailor Moon, and I was like
Yeah,
deeply in both of them,
yeah,
to the
yeah.
point where like we're reenacting them. And I remember in the maybe third grade, I had this like group of friends and we would play Dragon Ball Z at recess. And obviously I was Goku, and like my
Obviously.
best friend at the time was like my son, and my girlfriend at the time was Chi Chi. And I just remember there was one time I was too deeply in character. And my son did something and I was like, "You're gonna piss off your mother." And they were like, "Ooh, you said piss off." And they like told the teacher. They called my mom in, and like my mom was just like, "Well, for us, that's not," because they were like, he was using profanity. She's like, "Well, I wouldn't say pissed off is profane in our house." So like, I'm gonna be on my kid's side with this one. But that's a very early memory I have of Dragon Ball Z getting me in trouble.
Right.
Um, but then Dragon Ball, so it was different in like the countries, but we had Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball was very much like the prequel of when he was younger, so had his tail,
Hmm.
all that stuff. And that was the first manga I read. I remember
Oh,
that
cool.
might have been in seventh grade. Yeah, I was just like, what is this? And I was just in my middle school library and I was just throwing it back, reading books backwards. I was like, what an experience. So that was my connection to it. I think in that way it was like my first experience of anime. I think Naruto later, when I was old enough to like appreciate what was happening, became like really my gateway.
Right.
But I think the foundation was laid with Dragon Ball Z and with Sailor Moon for sure. So yeah, it was again the connections I made and inspired my first foray into certain aspects of my nerddom in a way that was really cool.
Yeah. And what you said at the beginning about like it being a thread that you didn't even know existed,
Right.
it's permeating every conversation I have over the last
Mm,
2 weeks. It's just been like,
mm,
oh wow, like it's yeah. Um, Brief aside, because you also grew up religious. I
mhm.
remember being in church, and Dragon Ball Z is pretty violent, especially like as it goes on later. It is very bloody and very intense in that way. And I remember uh, being in not church, the Kingdom Hall, because Jehovah's
Mm,
Witnesses, right?
right.
Um, and somebody had got caught watching Dragon Ball Z.
Not
Uh,
caught. Okay.
because no, because like we know we're not supposed to be like
Uh huh.
Jehovah's Witnesses know you're not supposed to be watching something as hyper violent as
Mm,
Dragon Ball Z, right?
mm.
And I remember the kid who got caught was looking around, like looking guilty as all hell because he's like he knew he was about to mess it up for everybody.
Oh no. Oh
And his
god.
dad was, he stood up and was like, I think we should have, big, like more censorship around the things that our students, or not our students, our kids are watching.
Mhm.
I watched what my son was watching one afternoon, this Dragon Z Ball, and it was just too much. It was too much. And like I remember all of us both cracking up, me like,
Mm.
Dragon what?
Right.
What
Dragon
did you
Z
just
ball.
say?
Yeah. What a horrible
And
show that is.
not staring daggers, but being like, bro, you messed this up for all of us.
Oh boy.
Like, how could you do this to us? Um, but yeah, I think I could pull out Dragon Ball Z stories
Mm.
um, forever. because it was just so timeless.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One thing I didn't know, and we'll talk about that in a moment as we get into the Playblack, is because I've always been more of an anime person.
Mm,
I know of the mangakas behind my favorite anime, but like I'm
yeah.
not like I don't know them that deeply or that well. And so seeing a lot of them post tributes and homage to Toriyama as, you know, their elder, as their inspiration, was surprising in that sense that I just didn't know, and really beautiful to watch. Of just like,
Yeah.
oh, like this man like had effects and had like inspired so many of like the anime that are so huge, and it's just like really beautiful to unpack and like see his legacy in real time in a way that I hadn't before. So that was nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, without further ado, let's just get into the Playblack then, because
Yeah.
I think we're going to get into a little bit of the history of Akira Toriyama, what he influenced, and where it stands now. And
Yeah, you'll learn about this man.
you gonna learn today. It's gonna
Mm-hmm.
happen. So we'll see you in a minute right after this. Akira Toriyama was a Japanese manga artist responsible for one of the most influential anime series of the last 50 years, Dragon Ball. Loosely inspired by the Chinese novel Journey to the West and martial arts films, Dragon Ball follows monkey-tailed protagonist Son Goku from childhood to adulthood as he trains in martial arts and searches for the Dragon Balls. Magic, starred balls that grants the person who brings them together a wish.
Yes, and to be clear, for those of you that did not grow up, these are not dragon genitalia or testes. These are golden balls, spheres, let's say, with stars on them,
Yes.
and that summon a dragon. Thus, the Dragon Ball. Okay, Dragon Ball, known to most Western fans as Dragon Ball Z, the title of the sequel anime, was not actually his first successful work. Toriyama submitted many one-shot and short-lived manga, his first ever published being Wonder Island, which was published by Shueisha in 1978. There's actually a compilation of his one-shot series called Akira Toriyama's Manga Theater, if you're interested in his early works. His first actual success was Dr. Slump, published in Shueisha's Weekly Shonen Jump in 1980.
Dr. Slump was like a gag manga. I'm talking like pervy sensei jokes, puns all over the place.
Seems like a thread.
Yeah, right. And parodies of pop culture of the time, like Superman and Star Wars. Like if you go back and read or watch the original Dragon Ball, you do see this heavy use of comedy and silly gags. It carries over into the first couple of arcs of the series. I think the first wish from the dragon, like Shenron, that's the name of the dragon, Shenron, and when you summon him, it actually results in like the softest panties ever for a pervy anthropomorphic pig.
Okay.
It was the 80s. It was a different time.
We gotta love our Japanese friends.
We do.
And our
We
cousins
do.
have such a specific way of being. However, it would not stay a GOG manga, popularizing the tournament arc and forever redefining the genre of battle shonen anime. Dragon Ball has influenced all of shonen anime and manga, with authors of countless series citing Toriyama as a direct influence, what I mentioned before. Authors from One Piece, Bleach, Naruto, Fairy Tail, Yu Yu Hakusho are just a few of the massive series writers that owe their existence to Dragon Ball and Toriyama. Thanks, sir. Big ups.
Big ups indeed. I mean, so obviously we're doing this because Toriyama passed away about 2 weeks ago. We actually found out, I think, last week. It was a brain bleeding issue.
There was a huge delay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. He passed away, and then I think the company got everything, the company and his family and everyone kind of got everything in order, and I announced it like a week later.
Oh, wow.
because it was unexpected. It
Yeah.
was not something that was kind of on the radar as far as
Mm.
as far as I'm aware of at the time of this recording.
Mm.
So so this is just a little tribute and a discussion because as we were just talking about, he was so influential.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the more obvious yet obscure like pieces of media that has aspects of Dragon Ball in it. I think I was telling you before we pressed record, Jay. Was Sonic the Hedgehog? Like
Which was
if
very
you're
surprising to hear. Yes.
yeah, like if you are if you've never played Sonic the Hedgehog, you're a very fast hedgehog that runs across um like large plateaus. It's a platforming game. It was pretty popular in the 90s. Um but when he got all 5 emeralds, you're already seeing a similarity. Um Chaos emeralds they were called. Uh he would turn into this super powered yellow being. Um which is just an obvious ripoff of of
Homage,
Dragon Ball
Miguel.
homage, yes, homage to Dragon Ball's Super Saiyan form. Um, and we could go on and on and on as to like what our favorite things that influenced what that influences come from Dragon Ball are. But
Yeah.
Jay, what are some of your favorites?
I think for me, uh, I'm gonna sound so basic. But I think
Basic.
Naruto, I see so many parallels, right? I think not
Yeah,
only do you get the tournament arc, and Naruto has one of the most popular and famous tournament arcs in all of anime.
true.
I also, the way I think about it too is I see like this constant leveling up, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
we're always going to be stronger, and there's another form and another form. Because even after I stopped watching Dragon Ball Z, and to be honest, like it was a part of my childhood, but in adulthood, like there were just certain aspects of it was like, not for me. Um, and one of those is I don't like an overpowered protagonist. I like
Sure.
real struggle and stakes. And for me,
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty like par for the course as it relates to Dragon Ball in particular. Of like Goku, even if he struggle and he even if he dies, um, he gonna come back. You know what I mean? I'm just like I've
Yeah.
never met a man who has died more times than this man's like, but I'm here, y'all. And so I'm just like, oh, okay. And again, being kind of like outside the fandom and watching like, oh my god, did you see that Goku just unlocked Super Saiyan level 12, the blue dinosaur? And I'm just like, okay. And so there's just like a constant level up. And I think for Naruto, it was similar. It was here I am, and then here's my Jinchuriki mode, and here's my Sage Jinchuriki mode, and then here's like perfect Kurama mode. And I'm just like, yeah. So that's, I think, definitely one that I still felt a lot of influence for. Um, but what I will say too that I enjoyed is in shonen, you
Mm-hmm.
don't actually see a lot of romantic relationships. You see a lot of like rivalries, and
True.
honestly very often it's like the platonic relationships that get a lot of weight and respect, but rarely do you see romance.
True.
um and yet with Dragon Ball Z, like you have, I don't know that I would call Goku and Chi-Chi's relationship like romantic. I feel like I barely recall that relationship functioning as a relationship. But I
Yeah.
think a lot has been said about like Vegeta and Bulma.
Mm-hmm.
I think how it treated women very early on, you know, with having Bulma being the smartest person and those androids kicking ass, the ones that had to. I think it treated them well. So yeah, I think those are some of the things that I've seen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some people will say the gag manga aspects of the
Right.
early stuff was very weird and pervy
Mm-hmm.
and sexual, and
Mm-hmm.
Japan has a very different view
Very different relationship to
of
that. Mm-hmm.
just younger people and
Yeah.
sexuality and things like that
Yeah.
that we won't touch on, but um, I think there's definitely something to the fact that like the first thing that Bulma does when she meets Goku is literally try to shoot him.
Yeah.
Like because yeah, and I think they don't do Bulma justice when it comes to later seasons when you get
Mm.
into that Dragon Ball Z place where her they don't really know what to do with her. But early
Mm.
on, she was like an integral part of the crew, and
Yeah.
that's a huge thing for
Mm.
female characters. She was definitely over sexualized for a lot of different
Mm.
reasons,
Mm.
um, but it time skips I think were a huge thing for me.
Mm.
Um, like I know that there were time skips in manga and anime storytelling
Mm.
before Dragon Ball, but to see that big leap from for anime watchers, Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z, where Goku, he's like, I think he just turned like 17 or 18
Right.
at the end of Dragon Ball, and then in Dragon Ball Z, he's like 22 or 23. He's a
Mm.
father. He's been
Right.
married for years. It kind of turns into a whole other series. That
Another
is
Naruto influence too, with Naruto
exactly
Shippuden and Boruto. I didn't even think about that.
yeah, a huge thing that or story device that
Mm.
manga authors and folks who create anime use to this day 100%.
Mm.
The tournament
Mm.
arc, I mean, it wasn't that it wasn't used before Dragon Ball, but the first like Tenkaichi Budokai tournament
Mm.
was huge. It actually it's when the popularity for Dragon Ball turned all the way up back in the day, from my understanding. Whoa. Um, that
Everybody has been getting really
uh,
cool fucking things where like they do that and a heart appears and fucking fireworks and
we're-
oh, you see, you get it. Why can't this is racist? I want to say right now that all of these camera places are racist. Okay, you saw that here on Playblack.
yes, they are colorist, I guess, in this case.
Mm.
But we're still figuring out how to use the software, y'all. We're on it. But the Yu Yu Hakusho took that and perfected
Right.
it. And we've seen tournament like battle arcs and everything. I think My Hero Academia, one of the big hitters of the last
Loved it.
5 years,
Mm-hmm.
took the tournament arc and flipped it on its head and kind of combined it with the training arc,
Yeah.
and did it really early. And
Mm-hmm.
so all of these little things are all Toriyama, and it's
Yeah.
it can't be like overstated the amount. I mean, I think Luffy was literally like based on Goku. If we're looking at One Piece, which has been going on for almost 30 years now, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
over 30 years now.
It could be over. Yeah. Well, maybe.
Almost, yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll get destroyed in the comments about that, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride to see how all of those influences come about. I think people tout Demon Slayer as this
Mm.
like groundbreaking series. I'm not saying that the animation is not,
Mm.
but I think everything we see in Demon Slayer has been done in some way, shape, or form
Mm.
um, in Dragon Ball.
Mm.
Um, I'm blanking right now on on how to connect
That's a
those two.
bold claim,
It is
sir.
a
To be
bold
like,
claim.
as to how?
Oh
Yeah.
no, no, and now it's gone. Oh gosh, I'm gonna get crucified for that one. I
Yeah.
think my little bits of Demon Slayer hate are just
Yeah, I was like, why is Demon Slayer catching a stray? We was celebrating all anime. You're like, but that fucking show Demon Slayer. Yeah, how derivative.
no, I just can't. Okay, brief aside.
Mm-hmm.
I think Demon Slayer is great. I like Demon
Mm-hmm.
Slayer a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the animation is top notch, and how they've integrated CG and 2D animation
Yeah.
with all the beautiful like color art style is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, I don't get why it's captured this moment so hard. I
Yeah.
think the story is fine. It's good. Like it's pretty standard.
Mm-hmm.
You get some dead parents. You you get a call to action.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of training arcs.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tanjiro is very Goku like. This You know, like
That's the thing. I actually disagree, and I think I understand
mhm,
more of like why it works. And for me, it's because it's interesting when people call it standard fare, because to me it actually feels very different than a lot of shonen. And
okay.
we talked a little bit about this in season 1 with um Rise of the Soft Boy, but I feel like to me the greatest difference is I don't feel that Tanjiro and Goku were similar at all, because,
Mhm,
and this is again, I've left Dragon Ball behind, so I don't know that the hard truth of it all as well. But one other reason why I detached from it was I always felt that Goku was very, one, a little bit stupid. He was always like dumb, like very himbo like. I think he's a himbo. Um, but I never saw him as a present husband or a
no,
present father. It felt
gotcha.
like the greatest love of his life is to fight,
True.
and he made lots of friends doing that way, and he always wants to push himself, and there was like an innate selfishness about that because he just wants to fight and he just
Yeah.
wants to be the best and do all that stuff.
Mhm,
Whereas Tanjiro, I feel like there's an, as big as the story is, there's an intimacy to the story of Demon Slayer
mm,
where it's not about grandeur. There's not like this alien, like over the top, whatever. There's a
mm,
very intimate and personal reason why Tanjiro is on his hero's journey. He's a very different kind of hero who very much operates from his heart and from his empathy. And he has empathy for not only his friends but the enemies that he faces, which feels really different to have such an emotionally intelligent and emotionally mature protagonist that like takes care of people and isn't like Naruto, who again is an idiot, or Asta, who is an idiot, like
mhm, mhm.
Luffy, who is an idiot. You know what I mean? Like a
Right.
lot of them are dumb, and Tanjiro's not that. And I feel like he's very different. There's an intimacy to this journey and a connection that's rooted in his. He wants to save his family, and he wants to like
Mhm.
heal people, and he doesn't actually ever want to fight.
Yeah,
Tanjiro
yeah,
never went looking for this.
yeah.
He never wants to, he doesn't want to even be the best. He
Mhm,
only wants to be strong enough to protect the people he cares about. And I
yeah.
feel like there's that like window into it that makes it feel different when combined with the fascinating art and the real emotional stakes of this really intense fight choreography. I think
Mhm,
the one criticism I give it is it gets, sometimes it feels redundant because it's always like, here's a new
yeah.
enemy, get a little bit stronger, here's a new enemy, get a little bit stronger.
Right.
But even the fact that that manga's already done, like they told a story and they ended
Mhm.
it and it's
Yeah.
relatively short, I'm just like, all those reasons are why I feel like it's a little bit different, and why I'm fully on board with the love and the train.
Let me bring it back to Dragon Ball. Let me bring it back to OG Dragon Ball.
Sure.
Um, because I agree with you. I do think that Tanjiro is an evolution. I mean, you can go back to listen to that Software episode we did back in season
Mhm.
1, right? I do think that Tanjiro is an evolution of the shonen manga like protagonist, right?
Mhm.
He is outwardly emotional. He is emotionally centered within himself, 100%. And but I also don't think you necessarily get that without a Goku. Um,
What do you
and
mean? Oh,
like
like we wouldn't have got there had we not had Goku.
yes,
Hmm.
and if we're going all the way back to the original Dragon Ball manga, why does Goku go on the journey? He goes because his 4-star ball, the thing that reminds him of his own family, right? His only family, Grandpa Gohan.
Hmm.
Um, he goes after the Pilaf saga. He goes on the adventure because he needs to find it and bring it back to himself because it's
Hmm.
the only memento he has for his family,
Hmm.
right? There is that bit of intimacy. This kid who doesn't necessarily know how to interact with the world, he goes on this big adventure because of the love of his family. I think one of the
Hmm.
most affecting moments in Dragon Ball for me personally is there is a tournament with the this witch Baba character, in which Goku actually ends up fighting his grandpa. His grandpa has a mask on, and he
Hmm.
doesn't know it's his grandpa, and his grandpa is like messing up all of his moves, um, because he knows what he's going to do because he trained him.
Sure.
And then when
Classic.
Grandpa Gohan finally takes the mask off, it's this big moment where this kid who's he's so strong and he's so happy-go-lucky, but he's had to take care of himself since he, spoiler alert, accidentally killed his grandfather. He sees him and he just bawls, and he's just like so excited to see his grandfather. So while I completely agree with you, he's a bad dad, not a very good husband. There are those bits of him that give us all of these other shonen protagonists. He is the baseline, and he can do a lot of things better. I think Piccolo is such a better dad than Goku will ever be. But to say that there's no intimacy there, to say that there is no emotional something to who he is, I think it's like fundamental to his character.
Well, let me ask you this then, because to me, you're mentioning Dragon Ball again, and I feel like I remember enjoying Dragon Ball. I remember the days of just like, little nigga had a tail. He would become a little fire-breathing monster in a full moon, and his little, I'm a ride on a cloud, I got my little stick that extends, and I'm going to go on some adventures. Right. And then feeling like later on, this became like a power fantasy, right? And it was just like, power, more, stronger enemies. Yeah. I can blink and destroy universe. It's like, okay. And so do you feel like, what was that? Was there a shift? Do you think like the storytelling changed? And to be fair, also, how much of that is just my experience with, one, hearing from the outside, but two, the anime, which, as we know, anime is not always based on always the manga stuff. And so it can be possible that some of that is what I'm taking into. But yeah, I guess, do you feel like there was a steady thread, a steady core that felt true, or do you feel like there was a shift between Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z?
No, I think there are definitely shifts. What I will say is, I think for me, a power fantasy is something that, like, it turns into a power fantasy when the power is unearned. Like when who's this motherfucker in Sword Art Online?
Kirito.
When Kirito just shows up and is just the best. Why? Because he's a beta tester? Sure, I guess. There were other beta testers and they weren't as good as he is. He's just good because he's good, right?
They don't put the time in. Yeah, you know what I mean? I'm actually a Kirito defender to a certain degree. Like, Sword Art Online has its problems. Like, I'm not going to say it doesn't.
100%. But for Goku, it's always earned. I think the thing that is important about his character is that he's willing to do the work to do what he had to get to where he needs to go. I think a bunch of years ago, you know this channel on YouTube, it's like Death Battles. It's when they put up these two characters from different universes, and they mathematically figure out what's going on. I think they have a great quote, and I don't remember it exactly, but it's basically like, Superman is, there was like a Goku versus Superman episode, right? And like Superman is perfect. Like he literally is just the strongest, versus someone who will always work to get over the hump, right? Superman still wins because he's perfect, but that is what Goku is. He is the one that will always continue to try. And like, there are flaws to that character. But if I were to think of a through line, it's from the kid who was just practicing martial arts outside his grandpa's dojo to like the god character that we have now. He's still training. It's been like 45, 50 years, and he's still working to be the best, because that's like who he is at his core, and that can be selfish, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, that's Dragon Ball and our reflections on that. I think the last thing that I want to say, just thinking again about the legacy of Toriyama, is you don't set out to do this, right? You don't set out to impact and change the face. What you do is you tell a story that's authentic. You make art that's authentic to you, that responds to what you love, that stuff that you want to see. And when you focus on making something that is authentic to you, then it has the potential to do all of that stuff, but you can't chase that. And so I feel like I really respect this man for telling the stories that made sense to him, that he wanted to tell, and watching the impact of that. And just a reminder for artists to follow your heart, to follow your art, to put all of that in there and not be obsessed with it's the moment you don't think about the effect that your work will have in terms of impact that arguably becomes the most impactful. And I think it's a really beautiful surprise to see the way that our work can facilitate connection and inspiration amongst other people to bring things into the world and make it a little bit better.
100%. Yeah, I think we're all thankful that with all the bullshit in the world, that there were things that brought us all together. And without Dragon Ball, there wouldn't be a lot of that. A lot of those connections that were made. So we're eternally grateful, and RIP to one of the biggest and best that ever did it, Akira Toriyama. Yeah. And with that, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Playblack. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a review. If you're doing the podcast thing, leave on an Apple Podcast. That really helps. You can hit us up at Playblack Podcast on TikTok and Instagram. Also, you can email us at playblackpodcast@gmail.com. We got some cool stuff in store for y'all very soon. We will be at Anime Boston this year. So if you're going to be around to hit us up, we're going to be walking around asking people fun questions. There might even be prizes involved. And in honor of Akira Toriyama, one of my favorite quotes, work hard, study well, and eat and sleep plenty. That's the Turtle Herman way. So, RIP Akira Toriyama, and we'll see you back here soon. What are these balloons?
I'm telling you, you're a witch, and you've just everything you do now. And again, nothing that I do, anything. So it is what it is.
Yes, you are the video editor, so please keep those in so these gags actually make sense.
I couldn't take them out if I want to. I'm not very good at my job. Okay, but so everyone, we'll see you later.
Peace.